From that to Ian Mann, Professor of Books, regular book reviewer, Managing Director, Gateways Business Consultant. Ian Mann reviewing a fabulously titled book for us this evening. It is called Beyond Disruption. It's by two authors, Chan Kim and, I'm going to mispronounce Renee Mauborgne's name. They're author of Blue Ocean Strategy. And the idea here, Ian, and I love the premise of this book, it's make new market space and make the competition irrelevant. It's big, it's bold, it's ambitious, and it's clearly one you like.
Yes, very much so. This whole idea of disruption has become very, very popular. And ever since Christensen wrote about disruption, and he talked about disruptive innovation, therefore was something brand new. In fact, Schumpeter, the Austrian politician and economist, wrote about this stuff in 1942. Basically, he said that wherever you have creation, you will have destruction. He says that's just the way the world works. So whenever you come up with a new innovation, a new market will destroy and displace existing markets. Just think of the horse and carriage, a massive market displaced by the car. A little more recently, think of a tape. I don't know if you were old enough to have tapes that you listen to in your Walkman.
Of course I am. And I mean, as a music DJ on campus radio, we used to have cassette tapes, which we would have to scroll with a pencil very, very finely so that when you played your adverts, which came on cassette tapes, it didn't start like that. So yes, I'm well familiar with the disruption. I think the world is a much better place today as a result of digital innovation for that and that reason only, frankly.
They had tapes, then we got CDs which lasted forever. They didn't stretch. They were all the music you could listen to. Then we realized you don't need all the music that's on the CD because you can't hear most of the stuff unless you really got fantastic sense of hearing. And we came up with the MP3. That was between 63, and we came up with CDs in 83 and MP3s in 97. And now everybody's listening to music probably on either on their iPod, if they still have that device. Otherwise, they just use their cell phone and go onto Spotify. This idea of disruption is Christensen seemed to pose this as something good. What the two authors, Chan Mauborgne, who came up with the idea of Blue Ocean Strategy, realized that there's another thing called non-disruption. Because disruption means that society in some way is impeded because when I put something new in, all those people who were involved in producing CDs or tapes or MP3s, they've gone now. They're out of work. He said there's a massive opportunity in non-disruption. And that's what this book is all about. How you find non-disruption and what it's about. So I think the first thing we need to do is to define what we mean by non-disruption. A non-disruptive innovation is one that exists outside or close to something that already is there. So I'd like to give you a couple of examples so you can see how this whole thing could work.
Great.
The nice thing about Morgan and Mauborgne and Jen is that they always come up with good techniques of finding the stuff. So I'll try and combine both of those things. Here's a good example of a non-disruptive innovation. It's called e-sport. Here you have another sport which doesn't in any way affect other sports that exist because people who are into e-sport actually there's nothing physical about it. So those people who enjoy physical activities can be e-sport lovers. It's aspirational because you're going to watch some of the best players in the world play games with each other and everybody can watch. Now, at the top e-sport event, the top are attracting 50,000 attendees in a live event. But in addition to that, there's 100 million of them online. This is a billion-dollar industry. They guesstimate that there's 175 million fans and no disruption at all. But the fact is that's very, very high tech. Let's go all the way to the bottom, to the lowest tech you could possibly get. There was a woman called Bilikis Abiola, who went to visit her family in India. And what she noticed was how poorly serviced the slums were. Because when you live in a slum area, trucks can't come in and take away the waste. The roads are too small, and they don't have the facilities to do that. And she came up with this idea that this unserviced group of people should be served. So she set up collectors who then go out and collect all this litter. The problem is how they get paid. Well, very simple. If you're prepared to separate your waste into recyclables and waste, they'll pick it up because they will sell the recyclables. If you don't want to separate it, don't worry, they'll pick it up anyway and they'll sell it anyway. And if you don't want to separate, you pay for it and they'll pick it up anyway. Now there's a whole new market which coexists with all other markets, and it's based on a technology that was in fact invented in 1870 called the bicycle. They have bicycles they have a trailer behind them, and they go around, and they've created this entirely new market without any disruption at all. There are so many ways in which disruption has improved, as a non-disruption has improved life, but it hasn't made any difference to anybody else. Now, I'll give you one other example, which I think is quite different to any of these. For a long time, and this also is a hint of how to find non-disruptive industries, because they do exist. You look for a problem that is taken for granted. In large parts of the world, particularly the poor world, a young woman, and the woman's going to be menstruating for a large part of her whole life, runs into two problems. She doesn't have access to sanitary towels because they're expensive, or doesn't access at all. And because a lot of girls miss school for a number of weeks in a year, simply because they're menstruating. And a number of women don't get into the workplace. And if they do go, they're using very unsanitary ways of keeping themselves protected from during this period. A very interesting man called I'll struggle to get his name right, Arun Chalaman Muruganathan, developed an entire new non-disruptive market. He's a man, and in rural India, the idea of menstruation is not discussed, certainly not even between husbands and wives. It's just a taboo. He gets down, he says, we've got to sort out this problem. He develops a small pad-making machine, and he opened up an entire market. The reason that people didn't have access was not only financial, but they didn't have access to pads simply because there's no distribution network across the hundreds, thousands of rural Indian villages around, which are poor villages. The distribution channel not existing made it impossible. What he did with his pad-making machines, he so far created about 5,300 micro businesses, where somebody in the room in their house can produce pads and sell them to the neighbors.
It's so often, Ian, it's the everyday stuff that is changed by one really good idea that fundamentally changes people's life experiences. It fundamentally changes the way an industry can work. And this book, in terms of its value and for whom it is valuable, strikes me, it's one of these wonderful books that if you're a bright spark who thinks they can change the world, you should really be reading it.
You can. And that's the thing. But here's an example of somebody making a huge difference. Bear in mind that if you look at the population of rural Indian villages, that's 200 million people who would be using pads. That's the entire U.S. female population. But let's go to another level. Another problem that we've had for a long time is we all know that people are poor because they're either lazy or stupid. Professor Muhammad Yunus from the University of Chittagong in Bangladesh studied extreme poverty. He came to a conclusion. These people are neither lazy nor stupid. And they work long hours just to stay alive. Just literally to stay alive. They can't save. They can't improve their lives because they have to borrow money and pay it back at useless rates, and therefore they just stuck in exactly where. He developed the idea of a micro bank, micro credit.
Correct.
So the assumption that because you're desperately poor and illiterate, you're uncreditworthy, and that if your banks should rather focus on big loans. And banks do focus on big loans to big people who are good citizens and good payers like Donald Trump. I think he's been bankrupt 3 times. What he did was he structured something completely different. It has to be structured differently because there's some inherent problems. Firstly, if you're illiterate, it doesn't help that you can go to a bank because you wouldn't even be able to fill out the forms, let alone are they set up to give you a microloan. So what he does, he sets up the banks, you go to the shack, and in the shack there's somebody from the bank there who you can talk to. He knows you're illiterate, and therefore he'll help you fill out all the forms. The way that you protect, the way that you're sure that you'll get paid back once you lend this, is because people live in villages. And in small villages, your reputation is terribly important. They have to get into groups of women. I think there's 4 or 5 women in a group.
Yep.
And they will lend one of them money. Provided that she repays, another person on the group can also borrow. And now there's a huge amount of social pressure that forces these people to be very, very careful about paying their debts. And pay their debts, they do. This multi-billion-dollar business, which is not based on a scientific invention or is not technologically driven, has made a huge difference in the lives of people. The key is to look around for problems that we've taken for granted, or assumptions that we've just become used to living with, and just see how can I change that. And there's a massive, massive industry waiting for people, non-disruptive innovation.
Thank you very much. Mann, our regular book reviewer and managing director at Gateway's Business Consultants. Yeah, it's fabulous. Mohammed Yunus, a former guest here on The Money Show, who start a Grameen Bank and revolutionized the way in which women, mostly in Bangladesh, were able to borrow money, and entire communities were uplifted just by thinking differently. The book this evening, Beyond Disruption, by Shan Kim and Renee Mauborgne, Mauborgne. If you can pronounce that for me, I'd be grateful. 2 authors on this fabulous book, Beyond Disruption, reviewed for us by Mann.